Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today I've got my friend Parker Fales of Beaver, Utah on the line. Parker, how you doing?
Doing great, Jay. Appreciate you having me on here. It's great day when I get to sit down and visit with you.
Yeah, for sure. I always enjoy chatting with you. The last time I saw you, I believe, was at the Western Hunting Expo, Conservation Expo. I saw you there with Clay and a couple of your buddies as well, and it was good to see you and get to chat. It's always fun getting the energy vibe off you. You got a good youthful energy that's always good for me to kind of recharge my battery. So that was fun to get to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks. It was great to see you up there as well. That's a fun show, and we enjoy going up there and meeting up with new friends and old ones every year. So it was great to be up there and see you.
Yeah, for sure. Today we're going to talk about Arizona mule deer, specifically on the Arizona Strip. You run around with Clay Bundy there of Clay Bundy Outfitters, and there's a lot to talk about with that and your love for mule deer. But before we get into that, a little bit of a background on yourself. I first remember talking to you, I believe in 2016, I had drawn that beaver elk tag, and you know, reigning from Beaver, Utah, I should say. We kind of had some chats back and forth, and I was with my buddy Tony Lyle there on the beaver and just had an unbelievable hunt. But that's kind of first where I started talking to you, I believe, and then we've kind of built a friendship from there and love talking deer. And I see you every year up at the Western Hunting Expo, and so it's I haven't had you on the podcast, but I'm looking forward to it. For the listeners out there that don't know you, talk a little bit about growing up in Beaver, Utah, and how growing up in Beaver, kind of made the love for hunting shine.
Yeah, you bet. Beaver's it's a really small town here in southern Utah, and I'd say we probably have 4,000 residents here, so not real big at all. And just one of those good small town America places where hunting runs deep in our roots and in our heritage. It started with me as a young kid. That was kind of, they let school out every year here in Utah to go on the deer hunt. So it's like a holiday from school, and started out young with my dad and my grandpas and uncles. Back then in Utah, it was a little easier to draw a tag. You could draw, a general unit tag about every year. So growing up about every year, I had a tag as a young boy. So that love for hunting deer and specifically mule deer, that's really where that came in.
Parker, what do you see there with the beaver itself? With the big burn that they had as far as the mule deer, pre-burn and post-burn. What would you say is going on there with the deer herd specifically in Beaver?
You know what? Right now, really, a lot of us locals talk about it. Right now, the beaver unit, it is hurting. Quality. They just recently did a fawn study. We had one of the lowest fawn survival rates in the state, along with body condition, fat percentage in the state, for whatever reason that is. So the beaver unit right now, as far as deer goes, it's hurting. It's hurting quite a bit. Of course, it gets a lot of pressure. They did this year a few more lion tags and opened up on a quota, which should help. And they actually cut the tags on the unit by I think 900 tags or so. So we're hoping to see that maybe turn around a little bit. Granted, there are still a few big deer around, and guys get those every year. Some great hunters here, some locals, but overall the unit is hurting.
I would think with the fire, I mean, of course the elk have exploded. I would have thought the mule deer, but it sounds like probably a little bit too much pressure probably didn't allow those deer to expand and really proliferate as much as maybe they would if they would have maybe cut the tags back a little bit.
Yes, you're exactly right, Jay. The elk have done well. Beaver's always been known for its great elk herd. And one time it was deer, but that slowly declined, and you're exactly right.
I know we're going to talk about, your passion for mule deer and hanging out with Clay Bundy, but I also know that you've spent a bunch of time with another just great ambassador for the sport of hunting and just humanity, and Randy Johnson, another beaver not Beaver, Utah, but in the unit of Beaver. I think he's from Marysville, over the hill from you.
Yeah,
Getting to spend quite a bit of time with Randy, looking at sheep over the years, and I believe that firmly, your influence of two of the guys that I know with Randy and Clay have, kind of molded you and shaped you into the guy that you are. But talk a little bit about getting to hang out with Randy.
absolutely, Jay. You couldn't be any more right. Um, I've been very fortunate to have both Clay and Randy, kind of bring me up and raise me in the hunting industry, and in guiding and outfitting. Man, I don't think I could have picked two better guys to do that with. Just incredible hunters. You know, I consider both legends in their own feat, but along with that, they're even better people. And that's the thing that stands out the most to me is children with great people, and in a world and an industry where I feel like that's getting harder to find. I've been very blessed and very grateful for the opportunity to run around with Randy and just what a wealth of knowledge. He's seen everything, been everywhere, and just being able to listen to him and learn from him and watch him and step in his footsteps in the sand. It's been remarkable and been a dream come true for me. So just couldn't be more grateful for that.
Yeah, one of the things I always admire about Randy is, he deals with a lot of the same public land hunting and issues and stuff that, all of us guides and outfitters do, but he always seems to rise above, and he just doesn't seem to ever wallow in some of that negativity that kind of comes with the territory of being around successful hunters and egos and, big animals and such. So, yeah, what a great couple of mentors you have. Speaking of that, Arizona Strip has basically just burned a hole in your heart, and I know from talking to you so much, you've just got a true passion for the Arizona Strip. Talk a little bit about how that kind of started.
Yeah, you bet, Jay. Growing up hunting deer here, talking, where the beaver unit is. I mean, great deer, but I've always wanted to get to that next level. Um, and man, I grew up probably like a lot of people, dirty faced little kid watching Mule crazy videos with Ryan and all that back in the day, going through the pages of the old Hunting Fools and Muley Crazy magazine and all those, just dreaming and salivating over the big deer down there. And that's it really caught my interest there. And after high school, I moved down to St. George, in St. George, Utah, to attend Dixie State University to further my education. Met my wife down there, was married, and it was like probably my second year of school, I believe. I had a couple uncles who were just real passionate about mule deer, just like me, and that rubbed off on me. They had spent a little time before I was even old enough to remember, they'd spent a little time down there just running around wanting to see some of the big bucks, late in the year in November, try to watch them, in the middle of the rut. And so, they knew the area a little bit, knew a few areas. So, being in St. George and having the Arizona Strip and right there in my backyard, I reached out to them and they gave me a few places. Hey, go check this out. It's a good area. Saw some big deer there, years ago. So I did. I took out one day after school, going to see what I could find. And I get out there on a point, and I roll up, and there's a truck right there, and outside of it, there's 4 or 5 guys out on their tripods glassing. And typically I don't, and still this day, I don't know why I did, but I pulled over that day and stopped, and I got out, and there was Clay. It was Clay, and he was glassing. He says, who are you? What are you doing out here? And just, got to talking and got to know each other. I had actually found a deer out there that was he was a big deer. It was probably a 230 deer. I was trying to pick up his sheds, and Clay says, well, what deer are you looking for? And I says, well, what deer are you looking for?
You played in the cat and mouse game with
Yeah,
one of the best.
exactly. And I knew all along if I have this deer, Clay's known this deer for 5 years,
Right.
because Bundy was no stranger to me. Followed him growing up. Was always a hero to me growing up, and somebody I admired. And so I showed him the picture, and he said, "Well, that's a deer I'm looking for. Next time you ride out, why don't you just get in with me?" And man, that's where it started. And ever since then, we've just built a relationship, just a great working relationship, but even a better personal relationship. He's become another father figure for me. I go to him for advice, and just what a great guy to be able to rub shoulders with and learn from and spend time with.
For sure. So that's how it started. So I've got a question already. So did you guys end up finding that deer together and getting them corralled and getting some more photos of them, or
You know,
what happened?
that's the funny part. Neither of us did. Another guy picked him up, and it kind of it. Clay named that buck the Parker buck, so he named that buck after me after that. And man, we searched and scoured that place, and we never did turn him up, but the other guy did. Just a sweet set, and was really happy for the guy.
So Parker, then you ended up graduating from Dixie State, and you live in Beaver, which is a couple hours away from the Arizona Strip now. Um, so that kind of started you getting out there on the strip and pounding around, and did you very quickly then just start running with Clay and going out and just learning the strip and kind of running it together? Is that kind of how it went?
Yep, exactly. That after that winter, that fall, that winter, that next summer, I really started running around with him hard, and just trying to suck up and learn everything I could. And he had taken me on to come out and help on their hunts. With that first hunt, I want to say it was 2015. Clay's brother Bill, his older brother Bill, he actually drew his own strip tag, and I was signed with helping on that one, and was able to pick the buck up and help him get in on it. Bill got the buck killed, and it was just a great deer, 215 deer, just a stud. And from there, that's kind of where I made my stamp right there, and that's brought us to where we are now. That next summer, when school was out, Clay, as you know, Jane, he said before, he works for the Game and Fish in Arizona, making catchments, wildlife catchments. So I spent that next summer working for him, helping him build wildlife catchments in the 116-degree weather.
Wow.
Out there, my butt kicked, and learning how to work from Clay Bundy, because he doesn't take it easy on you.
Yeah, and now he had a young guy with him that was with a strong back. He probably put you right to work, didn't he?
Exactly right. Yep, I got all the heavy lifting. He'll tell you otherwise, but
He said, "All right, kid, you want to look at big deer? Before we do that, you got to work your knuckles into the ground here."
exactly. Yep, that was kind of my moment of truth to prove myself to him, and I guess I passed because I'm still with him. So.
It's interesting how these things work out, and something as treasured as the Arizona Strip. I would think from a third party, just I know Clay well, but it would seem like anybody would be a little bit reluctant maybe to bring on a stranger, a young guy, I think it says a lot for Clay and the fact that he trusted you enough. His initial impression of you was to trust you enough that you were going to be someone that was going to be loyal to him, and I think it says a lot for both of you. But what are your thoughts of that? And did you have any thoughts, when all of it was going down, of is this guy really going to trust me like I know he should?
Yeah, you bet. There at the beginning, I always tease him that he's kind of playing hard to get. I was always bugging him, and Clay's the older generation, and he's not checking social media 24/7, always on his phone. But at first I think it was Clay's been burnt before, like many other outfitters,
Sure.
In the industry, and with the people and the way they are today, it happens. and so, with having those previous experiences, I can't blame anybody or him with having a little bit of nervousness about it.
Right.
Um, and and typically, I don't. It was just weird. It was just like we came into each other's lives at the right time, and it was just one of those uncanny things where it just clicked. It's like I'd known this guy my whole life, and he felt the same thing about me, and man, it just worked out where lots of times it doesn't, and I was just grateful that this time it did. You know.
That's fantastic. Let's get back to building these water catchments. So I mean, from point A to point B, you've basically seen how they're built, and you've built them from zero to 100, so to speak. You know how to completely build and how the whole process works.
You know what? I know how it works, but I don't want to do it.
A lot
I
of
can
work.
tell you it works, but it would take a job that takes Clay a week. It would take me probably 2 months to complete that job. So I'm nowhere qualified to be doing it. I was just kind of the grunt, but I was able to see, what goes into it and what it takes to build one. So yeah, I know what happens from the ground up.
Explain to the listeners that maybe are not familiar with the catchments as far as how prevalent they are out on the Arizona Strip and how important they are on the Strip.
Man, out there, I mean, they're everything. You know, there's a few dirt tanks, but those are not reliable just because on years where we rely on the monsoons to fill those dirt tanks. And there's lots of years where those come late or they don't come at all. And for the wildlife, I mean, not just for deer, all the wildlife using them, birds, I mean, everything to have those, man, it's just absolutely incredible. And it's been neat for me to see. I could brag on Arizona a little bit. They do such a good job taking care of their wildlife, where they're going in and doing these projects and putting money on the ground that the sportsmen give them through auction tags and raffles, and man, they turn that money right back around to put into these catchments. And these catchments are built with a tin apron, with basically a gutter down on the end, and they're on a slope, so that rain hits the tin and goes into the gutter, and it fills. There's three tanks underneath. I think they're each 1,000-gallon tanks. They're underneath, and they fill those, and then there's a float valve that then fills the trough. And so about all year long, after one storm, about all year long, you can rely on those to be full of water and to be able to support wildlife all across the strip. And they even have them down south of the ditch down there.
So in 13A and 13B, I'm not looking for exact numbers, but what would you speculate as far as drinkers on the Arizona Strip? I mean, are we talking, is there 40 or 50, or is there 100?
And it's got to be right around 100. I mean, if I was to send you a picture of my Onyx right now with all of them marked on there's got to be it's got to be pushing that 100 mark, if not more. Clay probably has a lot better idea on that. But.
And these trick tanks, I mean, have you seen situations where, because of creating the availability of water, has it actually allowed deer to live out in habitat that maybe they wouldn't because they have to move for water? I mean, have you seen specific cases where, deer specifically stay in certain areas because of that water?
Absolutely, Jay. I would say I see that more often than not. There's vast areas in more in 13A, but even in 13B that it's no man's land. And when these dirt tanks don't have water in it, I mean, it can't support life in the middle of summer. July, August, when it's 100 degrees and over. These trick tanks, these catchments, are absolutely just a saving grace for these animals to be able to continue and thrive in the areas where that's best suited for them.
And they're also fenced off from cattle, right?
Correct. Yep. They're built with it's almost like a wrought iron fence, and they have, the Game and Fish has certain, codes you have to go by to build these. And the fence is shorter, and so that, the deer can jump over easier. And of course, it's the new ones. Some of the old ones still have barbed wire around them. The new ones do not, so that, fawns and other wildlife can slip through without being caught. I mean, just they put everything in mind for wildlife when they build these. It's really neat.
Your everyday life out there on the strip this time of year, I know you were just out there running around, putting up trail cameras, checking feed conditions and stuff. How has I guess, your time out there kind of evolved since when you first started going out there? I mean, do you have a full rhythm that you get into, you and Clay both? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really evolved from when I started. Just like you said, my passion and my burning desire for that place has just grown to about a level that can't be controlled. So and my wife will tell you that.
It's clinical. It's a clinical mess. Yes.
Exactly. So we have we kind of have a schedule we go by every year. Starting about a month ago, you start cleaning up cameras, brushing the dust off them, and pulling all the, at the end of the pull all the batteries out so that you don't, get the mess inside of them. It starts real early. Putting cards in, programming cameras. New cameras are ordered, batteries are ordered, locks are ordered, SD cards are ordered. It's a big process each year, preparing for the next one. A lot of behind the scenes work that probably isn't thought about unless, of course you're doing it. And there's a lot of guys that are. So we just got done with that process, and we are now in the process of driving around and getting the cameras out, driving lots of miles, beating trucks and blowing tires, getting cameras out, checking dirt tanks for which ones are full, which ones are dry, getting those catchments that have water, getting them set. And we're right now in the schedule is the process of getting all those out. And then, come the end of June, 1st of July, that's where we really get serious about climbing up on the knobs, getting some of these deer that are either on camera or some of those deer that we're missing, getting eyes on those deer. And that's something we take, very seriously is, and you've seen it, Jay, in your hunting career, that some of these animals on camera can be so deceiving. And so, for us, it's key when you're dealing with just a matter of inches on a deer. For some guy, it's key to get eyes on that deer, and even more so to get video of that deer, with phone scope and some of these digiscoping adapters that have made that possible. Man, that's changed the game tremendously, where you can take that home and judge that animal, for a week or, and sit down and really pick them apart. And that's part of the process that's really important to us, and probably the process we enjoy the most, getting out and filming deer in the summer and in the velvet, spending time up on knobs. That's kind of our favorite time of year for us.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What do you typically notice when you get a deer on camera, when you actually see them in person on the Arizona Strip? Do the cameras shrink them, or do the cameras make them look bigger?
You know what, Jay? I've seen both. And just in my short time, I've seen both. Typically it seems like they shrink more than the other.
You mean the cameras shrink them, or they look bigger when you see them in person?
The cameras shrink them. That they look smaller in a trail cam picture, because typically you're getting these deer at night. They're coming in and watering at night, and depending on the angle of the camera, that's something you have to think about too. If that camera's up higher than the deer looks smaller. If the camera's low, kind of low, shooting up at the deer, he looks bigger. And that's stuff you have to take into consideration when you're trying to judge a buck. So there's, we've been pleasantly surprised on a few deer where we've where we've got eyes on them and know that we've significantly underestimated them. But we've had deer the other way too, where we've got and it seems to be more of a daytime picture, and it's a close picture. They're right up by the camera, and then you get eyes on the deer, and you're just, man, gosh dang it, he's not quite what I thought he was. So it's just interesting, depending on the what time of year it is, daytime, nighttime, the quality of picture, all that gets taken in trying to judge these deer.
For sure. All right, so you've been out there pounding around, putting cameras out. What's it look like out there, both units?
You know what, the feed out there right now, I got a few pictures. When I was out there last week, the feed just, man, it looks phenomenal. The cliff rose is blooming right now. It is, and it's just absolutely beautiful. The cliff rose, Clay likes to, and he showed me, you grab a piece of that cliff rose and squeeze it, and that cliff rose kind of has a grease to it. And it's kind of a sticky grease. And, man, when you're pulling it off right now, that cliff rose, it isn't dry. It's lush and healthy, and it's just greasy. And Clay always claims with that, when cliff rose is like that, that's what makes big bucks. And so that, as far as feed goes, it's looking really good. It is dry right now out there. Lots of dirt tanks that typically have water are dry. Just where we haven't gotten any monsoons, and those monsoons, we're not off schedule on that. The difference last year, we did get a lot of moisture in May last year. I was thinking back, I think about this time last year, we actually got a little skip of snow up on 13A, and just a little bit different this year. It's hot out there this week, and just haven't got that May moisture that we got last year. But
do you think
overall,
that's going to make a difference in antler growth, or do you think it's still too early to tell?
I am concerned with it a little bit. I'm concerned anyways, because 2019 was so great. It's how do you top that?
Right.
But at the same time, as far as percentages go, we're still on track with last year. We got more spring moisture out there this year than we got last year. So I think we're about right on track. We're not behind at all with as far as percentages go. I'm just, I'm a little concerned with the timeliness of it. I'd like to see some May moisture, as of course we all would, but I still think we're okay. And I mean, it's not going to be a down year for sure. It's going to be an incredible year to have a tag. I mean,
what's the forecast? I know here in Colorado we've been getting afternoon showers, and I know Arizona, I think down by Phoenix, got a shower a night or two ago. What is the forecast out there for the next 10 days? Is there any sign of precip at all?
When I was looking this morning, I can actually pull it up here as we speak for Mount Trumbull. For the 10-day, it's not showing anything. But with that, it didn't show anything this weekend, and it looked like there was a small storm that rolled through right there by Colorado City, which is on the the northern end right there of 13A. So some of those storms just pop up, but right now, as far as the 10-day goes, it doesn't show any chance of precipitation.
All right, let's talk. I want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about getting to work with Clay Bundy and getting to know him. Maybe some of the tricks of the trade, if you will, or some of the tendencies that you've seen, over the years, him portray throughout the year. What makes him a good deer hunter?
Yeah, you bet. Man, where to start? You know what? One of the biggest things, and I'd spent a fair amount of time glassing, but not to the extent that I do now, and that I've learned and that I've adopted from Clay. Clay, he really is tremendous glasser. He's been brought up by some great glassers that taught him. He's spent a lot of days glassing with good friend Greg Krogh, who's just a tremendous glasser and has that reputation. And Clay is he's very observant on everything, just the finest details. And so I always give him crap that I'm a better glasser than him, but in reality,
Just to poke him in the side.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of friendly competitions, and he might disagree, but I think I've won the majority. We'll sit down and say $5 says I find him first, and he just blames it on young guys.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Young guys, So, but Clay, and Jay, just like you've talked a lot about, and and I've learned a lot from you too, following over the years, is glassing off a tripod, keeping a low center of gravity to the ground. Not extending those legs and that center post. Staying low down where the wind can't affect. You don't get a lot of vibration in the glass. Using quality gear, quality equipment. Most of the summer we live, behind your Muskie 15s and a quality tripod head, and that's something Clay taught me. Is when I was young and getting into the good glass, he said, well, that good glass isn't anything without a quality tripod. And, he couldn't be any more right when he told me that. And that's one piece of his arsenal that he's taught me a lot of, and
what about
thinking over.
Parker, what about, the fact that he's, running cows and out there all the time? I mean, how is it when you go run with them, or when he tells you, hey, go up and check this, that, or the other? When you first started, were you like, huh? Where is that on the map or something? And he's like, what do you mean on the map? It's up there by so-and-so's old pasture, da-da-da. And you're just like, dude, fill me in here.
Yeah, exactly. No, you hit it right on the head there. I give him crap every year. Say, Clay, come on, just buy an Onyx so you can share a point with me and show me what you're trying to tell me. Because he's saying, no, this little hole right here by this tree, and it's just like, the guy's got a memory like an elephant. He doesn't. I mean, he cannot go down a road for 15 years, and he knows right where that road turns off, and you hang at this tree, and so it's been frustrating and fun for me at the same time to try to learn what he's talking about. And after lots of hours of driving around in Google Earth and Onyx, I've been able to pick up, and now I can work out a little bit easier when he's trying to tell me something. I can figure out what he's talking about. But he just has so much knowledge, from, like you said, he's literally out there just about every day. Throughout the year, whether he's doing a wildlife catchment, whether he's building a cattle catchment for another rancher, which is, a catchment made for cows specifically, which wildlife use as well. And then he's running his own cows. And then with that, when it comes around the cameras and glassing, he's just darting all over the place. And so through so many years of doing that, man, he's picked up on, places where they like to cross and where he's seen a deer here or there, and it's just remarkable to watch that and learn from him on that.
As far as knowing the strip very well compared to maybe say other people that maybe just spend a little bit of time here or there, a month or something up there per year and running around. I mean, can you think of specific deer that you guys killed because Clay knew how to get around and what those deer were going to do? I mean, having that firsthand knowledge of what, how to get from point A to point B, number one, but number two, that deer's going to head this way. He's going to go into that draw. You need to cut, you need to be over here. As far as that, has that been something that's amazed you?
Absolutely. There's been deer that, and even more so the last couple of years, there's been some deer in some areas that he really enjoys, that he's really been brought up hunting in with his dad. and he's hunted numerous big deer, giant deer, mega deer in there over the years. And I can't imagine not having it. He's got that. He's hunted deer in there, and there's been a mistake or something that a certain deer he's hunted in that same area has made, and he's able to use that on a deer today. There's a buck he hunted years ago. Marley did this. He hit here. He liked to bed here, feed on this ridge. This deer's doing, living in a similar area, and you're able to flip that and use that, on a deer that we're hunting today. Just, that the knowledge just compounds on itself and just builds on itself each year. It's happened for me just in my short time out there. And I'm just a greenie and learning. And there's lots of people that know better than me, but Clay he's able to, just the knowledge he's been able to compound from when he started years ago. It's fun to watch and learn from.
Definitely shorten your learning curve as well.
Yes, exactly.
Let's talk about following deer, specific deer, maybe not giant deer, but, deer that you've been watching and then all of a sudden, boom, they blow up, and, having that inventory and pain, having the boots on the ground and just the love of following those deer and what Clay's taught you with that.
Yeah. And that's something that's become really fun for me and big for me is, before I was just looking at the end. I just wanted the big buck. I just wanted to see the big buck, follow the big buck. And something Clay really gets excited about, he's talked to you a little bit about before, and something I've caught on is his love for potential in young deer. And that's one thing Clay is, man, he's so good at. He's got a trap in his memory, and he'll see a young deer that, he's doesn't quite have the mass yet. He's got great eye guards, great frame, great G2s, maybe a little kicker, just looks like he's going to explode one day. And Clay will remember that buck, and he will go back every year for a young deer, just priming and prepping a deer, and I can think of one deer, for example. The deer was actually killed this year with one of the statewide tags. It was a young deer it was on the rifle hunt. We're coming up the road, and, that little baby face buck is standing right in the road. And, he's probably just close to a 200-inch deer with all of his extras. And, the hunter was on his way up, and it was a tough year too. I mean, we were having a hard time trying to turn up some big deer that we were after. And this is a buck, we had on camera, and, we got to look at each other, and Clay looked at me, and I'll never forget, he yells out the window, "Stay alive, grow up," and as we drove off, and that buck was able to stay alive for a couple more years and reached his potential. And, even then I couldn't see what he was going to become. But Clay did. And that's just something that, I've tried to learn from and pick up on, and some guys just have it more than others. And I'm hoping again to spend enough time with him, and I have enough time in it that I can do that as good as he can. But there's just deer that you're after each year, and you might not catch up to them that year, but just persistence and staying on them, following them from when they're babies, and just waiting for them to blow up and hit that prime age where they really turn into something special. It's a lot of fun.
I want to take just a second here, and I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider. I want to remind you guys it's application season. We've got Arizona due here June 9th. Go Hunt Insider is the best Western hunting resource out there. If you're not a Go Hunt Insider member, you're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card just for signing up. Go to gohunt.com/JScott. Sign up. I also want to thank Go Hunt, the optics department. My friend Cody Nelson, I call him the glassing guru. He is the optics authority. He's the optics manager at gohunt.com. If you guys are looking for any binoculars, optics, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, rangefinders, tripods, anything to do with glassing, give Cody a call at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2, or you can email him at optics@gohunt.com. You can also call him on his cell phone or text him at 602-399-3699. I want to thank Cody for all the work that he does for the J. Scott Outdoors listeners. I want to thank phonescope.com. Use the JScott20 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount on all orders. I also want to thank Kuiu Ultralight Hunting. Kuiu just announced the new Velo pattern. Parker, I know you like wearing Kuiu. The new Velo pattern's pretty sweet. I think it's going to be a neat pattern out there on the Arizona Strip. Go to Kuiu, that's KUIU.com to find out more. You can also order all of the gear directly off the website. They're a direct-to-consumer model. Also, onxmaps.com, use the JScott20 promo code. You're going to get a 20% discount on all orders. And I want to thank the sponsors. They make it possible for me to spend the time I do on this podcast. I want to thank you guys, the listeners, for supporting them. Parker, I want to shift gears a little bit here. I want to talk about each unit specifically, 13A and 13B. Let's give me a kind of an overview of 13A, and then we'll do the same thing with 13B, whether it be terrain or geography, size, density of deer, whatever. Just give me the spiel on A compared to B.
Yeah. 13A, it's located, it's the most eastern unit there. It's bordered by, Kanab Creek there. Then you meet the Grand Canyon National Park boundary. It comes down and bounces down what's called the Hurricane Rim, where it runs north and south. Just a big old unit, giant landmass. But your 13A, what happens with it is there's not as much habitat for deer, speaking, in 13A as its rival 13B. There's a lot of just open sage, flat land, just more antelope country than maybe you would find in 13B. Basically it, elevations just a little higher. Not much though. I mean, you're finding the same vegetation, and trees and everything that you find on 13B. And then 13A, it seems it's with that, that happens is the deer densities are spread out a little bit more. And as well as there's just a little bit lower density on 13A than there is on 13B, just because 13A doesn't have the environment for the deer to sustain a herd like 13B does, and which is a lot of a reason. It's kind of the reason some people are a little bit gun shy about 13A. And you and I have talked a little bit, Jay, that it can understand that, but lots of times that's not wise either. 13A is, and it's, I always tell people 13A has just as big of deer as 13B, just maybe not as many of them. And so, yeah.
So one of the things that I keep hearing about 13A is the fact that it does border the Grand Canyon National Park, and so you do have some deer, if the rut were to kick in, that would potentially cross out of the park, come looking for does, and that's kind of the unknown variable with hunting 13A is you never know what might, make a circle and get on the wrong side of the fence at the wrong time. Without that park there, do you think that A would be as good as it is?
You know what? I do. That, the interesting thing about the park is it supplies with some big deer, but also it saves a lot of big deer too. Those deer know where that line is. And over the years, Clay's hunted a lot of deer there, and in my time, we've hunted deer over there. And those deer, when they get pressured, they'll feel that pressure and they'll jump right back into the park. And what really brings those deer out of the park is when it starts drying up. When it starts getting hot and drying up, there's some water in the park, and on the rocks and stuff in there. When that water starts drying up, they have to come out because there's more dirt tanks and sources of water out of the park. So that's really what brings those deer in 13A out of the park. And it does bring a lot of surprises and fun bucks, and supplies it with some great deer. But just like I said, it saves quite a few every year as well.
Now tell me about B.
13B is, it starts right there, right out of St. George. Of course, meets the boundary right there down the Hurricane Rim with 13A. And then, goes clear. You can run clear over to the Nevada border. You hit the line there. And then again, you hit the line there on the edge of the Grand Canyon, to the south. Just a giant, daunting unit that literally there can be a deer in any inch of it. And that's what, that's what makes it so daunting, but so appealing as well for hunters, that know, with that, there's more deer, there's a larger deer density. And with that, there tends to be, more big deer. And so that's why, they give more tags on 13B than they do on 13A to compensate for those densities and the resident deer that are there. Really good in both of them. You can get around really well in a vehicle. You can get about anywhere you need to. And then, when you have to, you can do some on foot, but you can get across very good access across both units. But probably even more so across 13B.
Parker, give the listeners, when you say a big piece of real estate, I remember one time driving from the north end of B going to the south end, and I want to say it was like 80 or 90 miles. Maybe you can correct me, but it was a long ways.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. If you get out on the end of, and you can go even further, but to where we're really concentrating hunting deer, where the deer density are the most, and they start dropping off. It's about 90 miles from that south end, and then heading straight back, headed back north to that end. It's a big long stretch. It's all on dirt road, and it eats a lot of tires.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so 13A, 13B. 13B's got deer kind of spread out throughout, more habitat in 13B. It's also why there's quite a bit more tags. When you're talking the archery hunt specifically, so just talking archery, talk about A versus B and the positives and negatives of both, and or why, is B better or is A actually a better archery hunt? Talk about that.
Yeah. And, me and Clay and, the rest of the guys, the rest of our team have, we've gone back and forth on this. I feel like that gap between 13A and 13B is closed a little bit more on that archery hunt. And the reason being, there's a lot of deer that summer up on 13A. And then as that feed dries out and the the weather turns cold and they start thinking about breeding, and that rut comes on, those deer will drop off from 13A onto 13B. And so in the summer there's some deer up there that won't be there later. So there's more deer up there in the summer. And I mean, 13A is just on the archery is a fabulous hunt. It's just a ball to go on that hunt. You're on you're basically on big deer every day. You're seeing deer, and so I do feel like that archery hunt on it, the gap is separated between 13A and 13B.
Now on the rifle, you give the nod to B year in and year out just because of more deer, more big deer, more habitat.
Yeah, that's what tends to happen. And Clay, and he gets a lot of calls where that's the case with people, and they're going 13B only, and whether they're resident or non-resident, and to me that doesn't always make sense, because I mean there's still some great deer, some big deer on 13A, and it makes it such a tough choice. There's fewer tags on 13A. Yes, there's fewer deer. The mega deer, the biggest deer, you know how it is, Jace, where it's so competitive. There's going to be several outfits on that deer, but there are deer that live in some of this antelope country, that live in some of this lower densely populated areas that you can get on big deer, and you can have those deer to yourself virtually.
The people that send me a message and say I'm thinking about doing the strip and I'm going to do it myself, what is your just initial, not because you're an outfitter, but just from what you know, what is your initial thought when you hear that? Whether it be archery or rifle, what's your thoughts?
You know what? I'm broke, but I'd be getting a loan for a guide fee, either trying to make it happen. It's just, man, it happens. There is a handful of people that will come up and go themselves and kill a big deer, and it can happen and it will happen. But the odds of hunting the strip and killing, what everybody's after up there are already low enough. And man, I feel like you just cut those in half or even, in 3/4 when you decide to go unguided. It's just there. I mean, so much information and so many eyes, guys on hills and the information on cameras and just years. And they've got years of information, that they know this deer does that you may not know because you haven't been up there. So, but you got the tag this year, but they've got an edge on you. And so I just feel like you really get your money's worth. I know it's not possible for everybody, and that's just fine. And you can go up there with your family and just have a heck of a time and hunt after a big buck, and you may get one, or you may get one that's a little lesser, but you had a great hunt. And I respect the heck out of that too. But it's man, that would scare me. That'd be daunting if I was to pull that tag and to think of riding up there and just going in blind. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Let's talk about specific deer. Some of your favorite deer, either that you harvested or didn't harvest, just deer that jump out at you. Give us some examples of over the last 5 years or so of deer that just, tugged at your heart.
Yeah. One deer that came on the scene about the same time I did, and so I've really taken to, is a buck we called Slow-Mo. It's actually a deer that we were able to harvest this year on 13A on the rifle hunt. That deer in about 2016, he popped on the screen on the trail cam, and again, just a young deer, but you could see what was coming. So the following year we hunted for him, and he lived in a pretty tough place. It's just tough to get a deer down in there. And the next year we never could turn him up, couldn't kill him. And then the drought year, which was interesting, where the drought year of 2018, Slow-Mo really blew up, which is odd, for a drought year.
So he got bigger.
Yes.
So was he one of the few that actually got bigger? So it kind of blew your mind?
Yes, exactly. And why is that? I think he was still a young enough deer that, it's me and Clay have talked about. It's like the drought will affect older deer a little more than affect these young deer. These young deer were still put it on drought years, and he was a young enough deer that he was able to still grow, with the conditions. And just we had a couple archery hunters just before the hunt. We had the deer on camera all summer. Just before the hunt, Clay was in there, glassing, and he ran right into the deer and just got some phenomenal footage of him. And his camera, on his iPhone, his camera got put on slow motion mode, so it was about a 20-second clip into about 15 minutes worth. And so there, the buck's name was Born Slow Mo. That's why we started calling him that. And so, we hunted that deer that year with actually a husband and wife that drew 13 archery tags. And, we found the deer right off. And the first day we bumped him, and that's something something I've learned on that deer on slow-mo is, once we bumped him, I was sure, he'd gotten out of the country. I was sure that deer's gone, and Clay, he sends me right back on the same knob I was the day before. And you're crazy, And
you're thinking there's no way. We spooked that
yep.
deer. He's long gone out of here. And Clay's saying, get back up there. He's right there.
Yeah, he's like, what? Learn something here, young pup. Sent me back up on the hill, and wouldn't you know, it wasn't even shooting light yet, and I had the buck feeding in the cliff rows, and it was game on again. And you know what? We bumped that buck hard 3 other times trying to get that deer killed, and one day he didn't. One day he didn't show up. It's like, okay, well, he's gone. We didn't see him that day. Well, the next morning, I'm back on my knob, and I picked the deer up, and I've actually posted the video before on social media, but he had an arrow sticking out of like his G2. So somewhere there that day, another archery hunter had gotten a chance, and he planted one, and that arrow was buried, sticking clear out the back of his G2 on the one side.
What?
Yeah, it's just one of the craziest things I've seen in my.
So the broadhead's embedded in the antler? He just hammered the antler? That's what I would probably do that. Just shoot him straight in the antler, because I'd be looking right at his horns the whole time.
Right, you could tell what the guy was looking at for sure when he was shooting.
So you glass him up, and he's got an arrow sticking out of his horn.
Right, yeah, it was still really early in the morning, and it was, it wasn't quite light, and something's not quite right, something's off. And he finally steps out of the cliff rows into a clearing, and I said, he's got an arrow stuck in his horn, It was sticking clear out the back. I mean, it was sticking out there a long ways. And again, I posted on my social media. It's kind of a neat clip, and so I was like, holy cow, this deer's been pushed all over. And man, wouldn't you know it, later that afternoon, that buck heads to the same hole we've had him bedded in before, and we get in there, and we ended up with 2 missed shots that day, dang it, and the buck survived. And so,
and tell the listeners, I know you're going to tell it because you guys killed it, but what kind of what are we talking? Like, what kind of deer?
Yeah, he's not a big, wide looking deer. He's a narrow deer, and he had some giant inlines, and the giant inline on the one side is almost so hard to see. It lines up so perfectly with the G2, but he had kickers coming off his G4. He had an inline in between his 2 and his
points
3.
everywhere.
Yeah, just lots of points, mass, just incredible mass, and just a beautiful buck. And we missed him that afternoon. So, never could turn him up during the rifle hunt. Fast forward through the year, get to 2019.
Wait, when do the pictures, do any pictures show up where he's got the antler or the arrow in his antler, and then all of a sudden it's gone?
So they don't. That happened right before he shed his velvet. And so when he velvet off, he broke it off.
Okay.
And then actually later that winter, he broke off the end line that the broadhead, I think, would have been embedded in.
Okay.
And so, we've been kind of scouring all over trying to find that shed because we want to see if there's a broadhead in it, be a neat shed to have. But anyways, fast forward to 2019, we get him, we get him real early. I think it was like June 1st, but we knew it was him. He's hitting the water. You get to the point where you almost recognize the deer's face. He wasn't developed enough to recognize his antlers, but you could recognize his face. And it kept on the deer. Got lots of summer footage of him. Clay got some great footage, and we stayed on that deer. We actually came within inches again in the archery hunt of killing him. Shot hit just a tad low in the shoulder and gave the buck a limp, but nothing that it wouldn't affect. It wasn't going to kill him. He had a little bit of a limp, and he made it through. So get to the rifle hunt, and Clay had Wayne Johnson. I think I want to say he's 78 years old. Non-resident drew the tag, and first thing 13A opening morning, we were able to pick up the buck, and Wayne was able to kill him. And just a neat buck that had a lot of fun following and learned so much from. I think he ended up scoring 234 right in that area, and just put an exclamation mark on that man's hunting career to be able to. He's been waiting all his life for that tag to get that deer, and he knows he may not have many deer hunts left. He was pretty emotional. It was just neat. Just gives me cold chills thinking about it.
That's awesome. So in 19, how did he compare to the drought year of 18? Was he actually bigger in 18?
He put on just a little bit, not like, we really thought he'd blow up. And that's just where just every deer is different. He was, I think he was at his max when we killed him. He might have put on 10 inches is all. So between one of the worst years we've ever had in 2018 and one of the best years we've ever had in 2019, there wasn't a significant difference in him. And so, that was kind of interesting to us.
I love the story of slow-mo. I was curious how the slow-mo name came, but that's awesome. Clay probably was all pumped about his footage, and then he watched it and it was in slow motion. Like, dang it, it's in slow-mo.
Yeah, right, exactly. And thank goodness I can figure out phones enough. I was able to get that at a slow motion mode and put it back to normal, so we were able to salvage the footage. So.
That's fantastic. What about some other deer?
Yeah, one that I had a lot of fun that really sticks out in my mind this year was Shane Roten. He had the statewide auction tag last year in 2019. And man, Jay, just the work that goes into a tag like that, and the sleepless nights, and just running hard, trying to do the tag justice and do a good job. Man, that really set the tone. We're just with our scouting, it really came into play there. There was a few other deer, and that's what happens with these tags. There's a few other deer that we kind of had our eyes on. We're hoping for a whack at, but unfortunately, a couple of these deer were killed before we were able to hunt because, from 2018, those auction tag holders had chosen wisely not to use their tag that year, and it carries over into the next year, into 2019.
So basically, they're able to go to the 14th of August, which allows them to go into the 19, which gets out of the drought year of 18 and gets them into new growth. And so what you're saying is you had your eye on a couple deer and they got harvested before your tag started August 15th.
Yes, exactly. Yep, exactly. So then from there, you kind of, we know the drill and kind of know what was going to happen. So you're prepared for that. We just kept digging and And interestingly enough, Clay was, on an antelope hunt, guiding an antelope hunter that are on 13B. And, man, they glassed up an antelope, were racing up to a knob to, get on a high point to shoot that antelope. And on the way up that knob, he bumped a buck and, never did get a look at the buck. It peeled off and got around, and he ran over, tried to get a look, never did. And that's where it just comes back to Clay's uncanny ability to, that for a week that deer bothered him, that he didn't get a look. What could that have been? And so he was headed out one day to check cows, and after the job was done, he got back in there, blasting around, and picks up this buck. And man, just what a deer! It's and it was a deer we ended up killing. He's just giant. He's 11 by 12. One side's like 133 and a half inch horn, the other side's 110. And he's a 270 deer. He's 270 and 8 on the score. And so I was actually in at work, and Clay phoned me, said, "Hey, I found this buck. Let's go." So I
So
raced
you got
from work.
sick all of a sudden and
Exactly.
called in sick.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I needed a mental health day,
Yeah.
So I, as soon as work was over that day, I raced down that night, got there in the wee hours of the morning, as Shane was on his way there as well. And man, he did an incredible job. He was down on another hunt and was able to drive all night and find a way to get there to us that morning. And we rolled in that morning, and right at first light, I sat down and picked up the buck under a tree. And it was just a neat experience and something I've always dreamed of, to be able to help and watch Clay and Shane work their way in on that deer and get set up. And Shane just made an absolutely incredible shot on just a world-class buck,
Was that a buck that had kind of slipped through the cracks, if you will, in the radar of the trail cameras?
Yes, exactly. Yep, he was. And that's what happens with some of these deer. We call them pond drinkers, and they drink on these big dirt tanks. They're hard to get on camera, and this is a great example of it. This is a buck that he wasn't found with a camera and was just found kind of the good old fashioned way, and got glass on him, and just, man, sure glad we did. Clay did an incredible job getting in and just having that intuition that he needed to get his butt back in there,
Yeah. Knew that he had seen something. It was eating at him to go back in there and check it.
Yep. And he just was relentless. He let it bite at him till he did it, and sure glad he did.
Yeah.
And that was one of the neat hunts I got to go on, as long as with Cliff Finlay. His buck, he was a buck, I kind of talked about, me and Clay have these little competitions. I set out on one side of the unit, and he was headed to the other on our camera run. And I told him, I'm going to come back with footage of a bigger deer than you. He said, game on. And I remember calling him that morning on the radio and said, I think I got you beat. I just filmed he's like a 220 buck, just a big old deer. And so I, radio him, and he says, yeah, I don't think so. I was like, okay, whatever. And, get done with cameras, meet back at the house and get there. And he pulls out his phone and shows me the footage, and I swallowed my pride in a hurry. He had found Cliff's, what eventually ended up being the buck that Cliff killed, buck we called Helper. Clay had filmed him that morning, and he was, quite undergrown still. I think he's posted some video, and he'll post some more of the buck. Quite undergrown, but you could just see he was just going to be truly remarkable. Interesting thing on that buck is he disappeared on us for about a month. after Clay had filmed him that day, I was so mad that he had filmed him and I hadn't. So I was on my way out there to film him, and I searched for a month and we could not turn the buck up, and the ponds were getting low, and we couldn't get him on camera. And it starts to sink in. Oh, did a lion get him? Was he sick? And just all these worries going through your head. And he's just such a big, beautiful buck. And Cliff Finlay, he was lucky enough to win the Super Raffle tag last year. He rolled out there opening day, and we set out with and that's the thing, Jay. Something I'd like to say is you just have a great team of guys, unselfish guys. There's no egos. There's no, just guys that love to put their hands on giant deer, and that's what it takes to kill these deer. It's truly a team effort, and we're blessed with some great guys. And my little brother Pace and my other brother Tavin were actually up on a knob and picked up the buck and just affirmed that he was still alive. And I'll never forget the call coming over the radio. Just that pressure melt off you. Oh, he's still here.
Alive, yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a 260 something buck, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was 258. And again, it was interesting, just like Shane's buck, he had one side that was just giant. He had one side that was like a 4-point side, and that 4-point side I think was like 102 inches. And then the other side I think was like 134 and a half. He's 35 inches wide, 54 inches of mass. Just a giant looking deer. I mean, just a buck you dream about, what you go to the strip for. And Payson picked him up, and the buck fed over, and it got hot. This is August 15th. It's pushing 100 degrees, and we just kept dogging all day, kept after it, bouncing from ridge to ridge. And Clay again told me, he said, "Hey, go work this ridge. I think you'll be able to look into there." So I got working that ridge, and I look down below me, and I see a deer standing there down in the bottom of the draw, and I sit down, put the 15s on him, and at this point he's probably only 300 yards away, and it wasn't him, but it's a buck with him. And I was looking at that buck, and all of a sudden I just catch a glimpse and some movement in my glass, and there was his giant side moving, and he was bedded under that tree. And so I called Clay. And
you were just freaking.
Yeah, just it was time. It was just about dark. It was in the evening. Dark was setting in. I said, Clay, you got to get to me. You got to get to me. So him and Cliff and Hammer, they did an incredible job just getting to me and racing there before dark. And Cliff just put a bullet in him, and just ended such a special hunt on a special deer. And just another deer, again, just teach you persistence. Maybe younger in my career before I met Clay and have learned what I learned, I maybe would have moved on, thought, that deer's gone. Clay, he's right here. He's right here. We got to move just a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we made that one little movement, and that day, we found the deer. And so just having that knowledge that he's built over years is what it was able to put us in the right position, and we were able to blessed to harvest such a beautiful deer.
So within a couple months, you'd had your hands on a 270 and a 260, 258.
Yeah. Last year will be a very hard year to beat. Yep, that was 2019.
Then the 13A buck that was 230, and then the other buck in 13B of Randy Perkins that was a giant.
Yep, I was able to guide Randy Perkins in 13B. I was lucky enough to have him as my client, and we were able to kill a buck we called Hollywood, one that we actually, interesting enough, Jay, is we found Hollywood while we were looking for Cliff's buck, living in the same general area. And, spending all that time trying to find that deer, we located this other deer. And again, on that buck, we hunted him for 6 days, and we hunted 6 days without seeing a deer that we even rose put the rifle on. And finally on that sixth day, we caught the break we needed, and finally got into the deer, and he had moved on it just a little bit. He actually ended up killing the deer at like 60 yards. We got bumped and bedded up in a hole with lots of other guide pressure. And we were able to have guys in the right spot. Again, just great shout out to our spotters and just guys that knew where to be and put glass on the buck and were able to work us in there. And that's what kills these deer. And he was a 230 buck, just a beautiful deer, inlines off everything.
What are some of the things that you've really learned about big deer and hunting deer that maybe you could pass on to the people listening?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest ones, like I just talked about, persistence. There's a lot of these deer. I mean, it's not all just grip and grin holding the buck. It's a lot of these deer we're following year after year after year, trying to make it happen. And finally it happens because, we don't give up on that deer. That deer's unkillable. You just persistence, keeping after that deer. And along with that is, like a lot of people probably are growing up, if you go to the deepest, darkest canyon, thickest spot, there'll be a big buck there. And sometimes that's true. But what I found, Jay, and learned from Clay is they are where they are. And Clay always claims they are, they live where their mother lived, where their mother took them. That's what their mother did. So that's where they are. And it's just like, Shane's buck's a good example of a giant buck that's in the last place you expect in the middle of antelope country, and a buck that's slipped through under your nose. And so, I've learned that deer they literally can be anywhere. And so it doesn't surprise me to see deer now in deep country or, in burrow country.
They are an amazing animal for sure. What about behavior as far as deer moving? I'm sure that's made you pull your hair out.
Yeah.
Deer that you talked about, deer up on A in the summer and, moving 25 miles.
Yep.
How do you kind of judge what deer's going to move, and talk about, some of that movement either from summer country or rutting or whatever may make them move?
Yeah. And we've had that. I've seen both where, and generally with a rule of thumb, the older a deer gets, his home range shrinks. I've heard Greg, Krogh, and Clay talk about that. But that's not always the case. And that's what's so hard is I really don't think there's a science to it. That deer does what he does. For example, we hunted slow-mo. Slow-mo, he grew his velvet there. We hunted him in the archery hunt. We chased him around in between the hunts, filming him. We killed him the same place we had just missed him in the archery hunt. He shed his horns there. His antlers, he shed them there. He's there all year long. And then we have another, one deer that we killed this year, Jim Cass killed with Clay, which isn't typical for the strip. But that deer moved I want to say 28 miles off of one piece of the unit into the other, which is really, and that's what's neat about cameras. And that's actually a deer we found just glassing and in our summer scouting is being able to track that. And, the deer moved so far, we didn't first realize that it was the deer we'd filmed in August in the summer. And then when we killed him, and it was actually about a week before we realized, hey, that's that deer you took those live pictures of, and so, behavior, every deer is different. Just, they're more like us than we think they are, where their environment, the environment they live in, the habitat they live in affects what they do. And that affects them for the rest of their life, on habits they have and what they do and why that they move. One example is that the buck we call Traveler, we killed with the raffle tag in 2017. He's 259, 40 wide, just a giant deer. That deer, he would summer up on 13A, and then and later in the year he would drop off down into 13B, out in the middle of 13B, some 15 miles or so. And when we were hunting that buck, when we were hunting that buck in 2017, before he shed his velvet, that buck, we had him in a hole and he bumped and busted, and it was turned into an all-day tracking event. And Clay followed that buck with Roy for, I think they went 11 and a half miles that day tracking this deer. And man, this deer, it was so neat to watch. He would come, he'd go through the trees. He'd just keep going the way he's going. Then he'd hit a flat and he'd dart. As soon as he knew as soon as it got hard to see his track, he would dart. When he got into a flat that was a little more full of vegetation, harder to follow the track, he would dart left or right. And then there was a couple times he came up to a tree or to a cliff rose, and he literally would run around it and run, backtrack, run right back on his track to a flat and then veer.
Wow.
And it was that's an area that has a lot of lions in it. And the deer was a 9.5-year-old deer. And I think, that deer had been chased by lions so much in his life. And too, he'd been hunted by some of the best mule deer hunters out there. After this buck, he had learned what he had to do to survive. And it was just neat to see something that deer would do compared to maybe a younger deer that we've killed that hasn't had as much pressure on him. He lives in an area that's not as habitated by lions, and he's not quite as careful about what he does. Where this deer, where he's older and lived in an area full of lions, he was very mindful of everything he was doing. It was really neat to watch.
Yeah, incredible stories. You've gotten a lifetime education in a handful of years, and I can't wait to see how the next 20 or 25 years goes for you there on the Arizona Strip. Just the experience that you've gained already is incredible, and to hear the passion you have for deer, it's awesome to have you on as a guest. And I know your team there, Clay, and your team, you guys are on the forefront of another great year, and I look forward to seeing the stories and hearing the stories and seeing it all unfold. And Parker, I just appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing with us. I do want to give you a chance. What's the best way for people to follow you guys, get a hold of you if they want to talk draw strategy or anything?
Yeah, you bet. I'm on Instagram. It's Parker_Fells. You can shoot me a message there anytime, as well as, my phone number is 435-421-9463. I'd love to talk to anybody that wants to talk big deer, is interested in the strip as well. There's Clay Bundy Outfitters on Instagram. You can reach out to us there, Clay there. Make sure to stay up on the social media there. And Clay's number is also 435-680-2991. He's out a lot, like I said, so if something happens and it, goes to his voicemail, leave him a message. He's really good at getting back to voicemails. He's had a lot of practice at that.
Yeah, for sure. Before I let you go, let's talk real fast sheep up in your units there, 13A, 13B. Why don't you go through them a little bit, talk about them?
Yeah, 13B, 13B North here in the Virgin River Gorge. I've been, blessed and lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time in there. We took Daryl Bingham last year in there. He killed a beautiful ram. Being able to watch and listen and hear from Clay, the 13B North is down in quality from what it has been in years past. And the reason being, I've talked with Clay about this, is those sheep, they're kind of border hoppers there. The Utah borders there on the Pine Valley, and a lot of those sheep are back and forth on that side, and so they kind of get whacked twice. But it is a place, and Jay, you've spent some time in there. It's a place that's rugged enough, and it's tough enough that it can hold a giant ram. You can hold a big ram that's maybe been passed over. And that definitely can be the case. And Alicia Hatch, she killed her great ram in there the year before last. And So it can still produce. And your friend Tony killed an incredible, just a beautiful ram in there with his client as well. It's a unit that that you can go in and still kill, with mid 160s, 170 ram. That's a realistic goal. I mean, it's tough, but I think there's some rams that get missed over in there. Then move on to 13B South. I've hunted that unit with Hudson Bundy, one of our great guides. Talon Bundy, his son, had the tag. Killed a great ram, just a young kid. Killed a great ram, and then Clay actually had that tag, and he's always wanted to hunt that place. As his dad grew up hunting it, and went down and killed his ram in there. It is a very, I tease Clay when he's going down there. So you're going alone then. But it's a very remote unit. It's kind of one big long face stretch there that you're looking for those sheep on. But it again, this year Clay went down there. I actually wasn't there, but they went down and he killed a great ram. It had 16-inch bases, which was kind of an anomaly for the unit. I think when Clay scored it, he got, 166. Game and Fish had 165, 164, somewhere right there. Which is an incredible ram for the unit. But it is a one-tag unit, so a lot like, I love to listen to the podcast with you and Brian. That's not a unit that non-residents want to look at. It's a unit, resident unit only. But again, there is possibilities for a big ram to poke into there, that as it shares the border with Nevada down near Lake Mead. And then 13A. 13A's you got 13A there where it borders with the Zion, and the Zion here in Utah, has been known, is kind of held as the better sheep unit in the state. They have had a little die off there with disease, not too much die off, but they have had disease where the sheep have struggled. But I think they've handled it quite well. But it has affected that. But some of those Zion sheep move into 13A there, where you can hunt some of those bigger rams that move into Arizona. And that's a great hunt. That's a hunt I would definitely have my eye on if you're not waiting for the 22s and 24s your whole life, that Jay's lucky enough to hunt every year.
No comment.
Jealous of you there. That's very blessed to get to do that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on. I'll put up the links to get a hold of you guys in the show notes, and look forward to seeing your progress on social media through the summer, and with the draw, the application, and then the draw, a month or so later, finding out who drew what. It's going to be exciting. So keep after it. And I know this is, you're going into your funnest time of the year with the scouting season. So enjoy it, and tell Colette hello, and I'll see you down the road. Okay.
Sounds great, my friend. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
All right, buddy. God bless. Take care.
Hey, you as well. Bye.